Today, it's at least our assessment that Xi Jinping and the Chinese military leadership have doubts about whether they could accomplish a successful invasion of Taiwan at acceptable cost. And I think as Xi has watched Putin's experience in Ukraine, and no foreign leader, I think, has watched more intently that experience than Xi Jinping, I think he's been sobered a little bit by that as well. It's probably deepened at least some of those doubts. Deepened the doubts, not necessarily, undermined his long-term determination to control Taiwan. And I think especially he's been struck by, at least up until this point, the extent of Western solidarity, in support of Ukraine, a willingness on the part of the West to accept short-term economic costs in the interests of something bigger, upholding that international norm that I mentioned before, that big countries don't get to swallow up smaller countries just because they think they can. So having said all that, I don't believe that military conflict over Taiwan is inevitable. But what does concern us at CIA and across the U.S. intelligence community is that we believe that Xi has instructed the PLA, the Chinese military, to be ready by 2027 to successfully invade Taiwan. Being ready does not mean that he's made a decision to go to war in 2027 or 2028 or 2026, but it's something that, we need to take very seriously as well. I think Xi Jinping's China, just as you mentioned, David, is a formidable rival, and it's a huge mistake, I think, for any of us to underestimate that. At the same time, I think it's fair to say that China's not 10 feet tall either. There are significant domestic challenges of an aging workforce and an aging population, a penchant for prioritizing order and control, sometimes over innovation in the tech sector, a penchant, again, for reasons of political control, of propping up inefficient state-owned enterprises that don't make a lot of economic sense as well, and a tendency in Chinese diplomacy, which sometimes can be very adept, but also in its wolf warrior diplomacy is sometimes overreached and antagonized, a lot of countries across the Indo-Pacific. And I think the partnership between Xi Jinping's China and Vladimir Putin's Russia is a strong one today. There still are some limits to that friendship in the sense that, to the best of our intelligence, Xi's China has not yet provided weapons and ammunition to Russia, which we know the Russians have been very much interested in acquiring from China since the war in Ukraine began. President Xi on several occasions has spoken up publicly and fairly forcefully about the dangers of Russia or anybody else using nuclear weapons. So it's an important partnership. I think both leaders are committed to it, but it's so far at least not a friendship without limits.